Welcome to Legal Innovation Spotlight, the podcast that brings you the latest advancements in legal tech and knowledge management. I'm Ted Theodoropoulos, and I connect with the industry's brightest minds to provide you with valuable insights and actionable takeaways. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in. Eric, how are you this afternoon?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, Ted.
Awesome. So you and I got connected on LinkedIn, as so many of my guests and I do. And I think we were riffing on fractional chief AI officer and legal, and one thing led to another. And you and I chatted, and I think it's going to be a great conversation talking about AI and legal. But before we get into that, let's get you introduced. So you have an interesting path. You started your career in construction and then later pivoted to legal. And you've worked in a variety of capacities, including fractional chief AI officer. And sounds like you spent some time in the startup world as well. But
absolutely.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and where you do it?
Sure. Cut me off if I start to run long, because it is a twisted tale. I like to stay entertained as I sort of learn and grow through my career. Absolutely correct. During the dot-com boom here in Chicago, tons of construction. So I kind of kicked off my career, general contractor, property developer. Had a good run of it, but definitely always kind of had that thirst for, just truly intellectually engaging work. And I pivoted my career about 10 or more years ago to focus more on, technology-enabled business process, legal process. Just really was feeling some opportunities as I kind of moved through my life and through the world for, so many different things that could be done better. In the meantime, I've, spent a little bit of time on boats on Navy Pier, got my captain's license, just sort of like continuing the learning adventure as it were. But went to law school for a brief master's program where I, really drilled down on legal process improvement, tech-enabled law, and everything sort of related there. And spent some time at a startup focusing on basically transactional law, legal departments at very large organizations, and how is it that they manage their language. And then I've been consulting for a while, and then President Biden put out the executive order for every department, every administration should have an AI officer, and that kind of kicked off my market exploration of, well, who else is looking for, an AI officer. And as I might have mentioned earlier, the most popular response that I get when I talk about that type of role, which everyone recognizes as being brand new, is, wow, that's an expensive hire. Like that exact quote I've heard multiple times, where people realize, you're going to need someone that speaks business, but also definitely, if everything that's true about the possibilities of improving legal process are true with AI, they're going to need to speak legal. They're going to need to speak technology. So, kind of acting as a translator. So that's kind of the kickoff to where I got to now.
It's interesting. I don't LOL often, but I laughed out loud. So if I remember correctly, there are 62 federal agencies that now need a chief AI officer. And think about the skill set that you just described. How many people who are on the cutting edge of technology want to go work for the government, who's 20 years behind? They're still running mainframes, right? Yeah. So it's like, I thought that was a really interesting mandate, and I laughed out loud. I pictured somebody like, the recruiter on a rotary phone calling up to recruit.
We got to upgrade. Yeah, our 8-inch floppy disks don't work so well anymore. Let's upgrade. Yeah,
that I got a big kick out of that. That was a few months ago, and I don't laugh out loud often, but I really did on that one. Well, you and I talked about something that I have talked about at conferences. I was actually on a panel with a very esteemed group talking about AI, where it should live in the organizational chart in a law firm. And we are seeing more and more C-suite titles with AI in it. Very few chief AI officers. In fact, I only know of one, but there are lots of chief innovation and AI officer, chief knowledge and AI officers. So what are your thoughts on C-suite roles with AI in the actual title? Do you think this is going to be a thing going forward?
I think it can be a thing. I'm going to make a general statement and say that it's probably a good bet. It'll be a little bit more show than substance, depending on the organization, of course. I've seen law firms and other types of organizations where this is the final kick that they truly needed to really start, leveraging all the data they have in the back end to improve and accelerate their processes. And so it's like, well, AI is the biggest thing. We're going to look great having AI at some level of our organization. So let's just make the first sort of 21st century technology step be we've got a person we can point to that says that's our AI person, and they might be someone who's just literally playing around with ChatGPT on weekends, but is coming from like being a full-time lawyer background all the way to somebody sort of picked up from a different industry. But if we're talking about the business world in general, C-level, I've worked with organizations that really understand the power of the technology, but also how their business works, how their organization works. And it's pretty similar to a conversation I had earlier today, which is, if I get the quote right, the gentleman I was speaking to, who has straddled the worlds between technology and law, he said, as soon as something gets operationalized, take it out of the hands of legal. It's like HR exists for a reason, all these different departments that are sort of legal adjacent. The other way that he phrased it was legal is by default bespoke. That's kind of the two sides of the coin. So as soon as it can be operationalized, you sort of build it out into a department. And that's kind of the mindset, is like nothing is actually AI specific. I mean, we're talking about, .com level transformations. It goes across the entire organization. But, how many chief internet officers did we see? Like, if you sort of do a comparison about how organizations transformed, and then let's be honest, there's some of them that realized, we're so much in the real world that there's some .com transformation, but as opposed to, say, a retailer that's, moving most of their business online. So long way of answering, I don't think we're going to see that many pure chief AI officer. I think the folks that really know what they're doing oftentimes will have a chief data officer who touches almost no technology, which is, I've had several conversations with CDOs over the years, and their perception has not changed. And I got a lot of respect for CDOs because they are just the absolute wranglers, ambassadors, translators, oftentimes in their organization, because their organizations have data. It can be applied to AI processes, but you've got to extract it, transform it, get it loaded somewhere else, and that's where the CDO comes in, is kind of intermeshing the data and the processes of an organization. So you can call it AI, but I think titles mean a lot, and a lot of orgs won't necessarily take that as meaning, our department doesn't have much to do with AI, go away, right? Like, there's always that danger. So that's my read on the world.
Yeah, well, your point about there not being a lot of substance, legal has already demonstrated this with innovation, right?
Right.
So the chief innovation officer, chief knowledge and innovation officer, so that I did a quick survey back. We've been around in legal for a long time, and I'm a hoarder of data. So I had ILTA rosters going all the way back to like 2010.
Right.
I took the 2014 ILTA roster, since that was 10 years ago, looked at how many titles had the word innovation in it. 16. Okay, so legal did not exist materially in law firms 10 years ago. There were zero C-suite. There were just one or two directors and some managers, analysts, so on and so forth. So in the 10 years since 2014, there are now over 300. It was almost
Right.
a 2,000% increase. And has the legal innovation work increased by 2,000%? Absolutely not. There is some really good innovation work happening in the legal space, but I can tell you that just from, I have deep relationships with a lot of folks in KM who suddenly I saw an I appear in their name and just
Yeah.
asked like, "Hey, how has your job changed?" And the answer was not much.
Right.
So, the concept of innovation theater is real, and we may run into that same thing with AI.
Agreed. Agreed. It's interesting you say 10 years because I was really digging into this subject 5 years ago. Don't have any hard data to present, but 2019 and then at the beginning of COVID, early 2020, I had the opportunity. I mean, everybody was locked in their house, right? First couple of months. Anybody and everybody would take a call. It was a truly like extraordinary singular time, I think, in the world of business and professions, was everybody was just trying to figure out what to do and was very, sort of closed off from the world. So, I was relatively early in kind of my exposure to the world of, very high end legal, but you could get on the phone with just about anybody, which was cool. And the feedback that I got was it felt like we were at the tail end of the first push for innovation, where everyone I talked to was like, yeah, innovation got really important. So everybody put that word in somewhere, but then you have the conversations and then the feedback is basically mirrors what you had. The interesting thing is kind of the most recent 5 years. It's been sort of that curve, that wave has started to grow again. There's absolutely been more hires. There's been more work. But I think it's very, very similar. Innovation and AI, sit 100 people down and have them define both terms, and you'll have, 400 terms, different definitions, because it's such an amorphous name, role, topic. People don't know what they're supposed to do. Nobody else can say clearly what it is that they do. So it's very much the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, innovation exists in other industries. It's usually called something different. I spent 10 years at Bank of America and worked in the in a business transformation group, which was essentially innovation. I think that the reason the legal profession has latched on to the word is because clients have commented publicly of just how uninnovative law firms have been. They still use, I mean, when I started in this, actually 5 years after I started, so this is 2013, I remember doing a series of road shows through ILTA that law firms would host us. So, I
Sure.
mean, I did like 24 in 1 year. So I was all over the place, ran myself into the ground. But I saw the inside of 24 different law firms, and I saw typewriters. This is
Yeah.
2013, 2014 timeframe. So, we've all heard, the billable hour won't die, and,
Why would it?
value-based billing. Yeah, it's a thing. It's like, as Richard Susskind says, tell a room full of millionaires they're doing it wrong. you know?
Yeah, the billable hour is going to die. That thing where you pay someone $300 an hour and charge $900 an hour for their service, 1-to-1 ratio, that won't work anymore at some point. We're telling you, but
Yeah.
until then, you're making 600 an hour. So, yeah,
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah, it is. I think AI has kind of reignited, like there's been waves of pressure. I feel like in legal, the last one was ALSPs, right?
Yeah,
The alternative legal service providers that were going to put pressure on law firms to do value-based billing. And you know what? ALSPs, I mean, they're still around, but it wasn't nearly the movement that the industry really thought it was or was writing about, in terms of transforming the industry. It seems like clients kind of like it. They kind of like the billable hour because I think they're partly to blame as to why it hasn't died. Because if they were demanding AFAs, I think we'd have them. We'd have more of them.
well, there's an insight that I gained about a month ago from a long established. I believe their role was CIO, Chief Innovation Officer of a large like AmLaw 100 law firm, and we're having this discussion about data analysis and deriving how do you come to a flat fee? How do you analyze a case, a new matter, compare it to, I mean, especially if you're serving large corporate clients, you have, similar cases for that same client that you could run analysis for. Nobody tracks time better than, law firms, 6-minute increments. What was astounding to me, and I got to admit, I had not heard this before, was a very simple statement that said, yes, we did awesome data analytics and we got a really good handle, we think, on being able to predict how much a matter was going to cost, flat fee, percentage profit on top. We brought that to more than one client who said, we don't trust you. We don't trust the math that you've done in the background to come up with that flat fee. We'd rather still pay you by the hour because we're assuming, as always, that you're just building in so much BS to that figure that we inherently don't trust it. And it's just fascinating because, who are you supposed to really trust in this world, right? Your accountant, your doctor, your lawyer. And there's sort of that holiness of the profession that's oftentimes put forth, the whole lawyer, non-lawyer argument. We won't get into it, but if you're going to, elevate a profession to that level of, reliability, fiduciary duty and trustworthiness, to find out that, multi-million-dollar customers are just saying, yeah, no, I don't believe it. And then you really realize, well, who's managing that relationship? It's oftentimes one partner whose client that truly is. And that's been another interesting part of the conversation. And I'll end here, but it's when I've been talking to firms about innovating, sort of going through this entire process, they say, there's quite a tap dance. It's just a field of landmines, because is the partner going to trust you to talk to the end client? I mean, that's like one of the biggest issues, because it's their relationship. They're going to want to take it with if they do a lateral transfer. So trust is a surprisingly large issue. And I got to say that I didn't fully see that coming with as little time in this field as I've had.
Yeah. And it's not to say that value-based billing doesn't exist. It does. I've actually experienced it when 15 years ago, when I got married. We did a will and estate. That was a flat fee. When I created a revocable trust, that was a flat fee. When I did a trademark registration, that was a flat fee.
Yep.
But it's still on the fringes. The meat and potatoes of legal work is still done hourly. So, I don't know how much AI is going to influence that, but it does feel like it has reignited the conversation, because people are now thinking, as a client, I want my law firm to be efficient, but, and I do want to reduce my spend. They have personnel and margins and overhead and things that they have to accommodate for, right? You make a huge investment in a Harvey implementation, for example, right? That's not free. So I can't give you the time for free and just bill you less. Somehow there has to be a strategy in there. So I don't know if you share that perspective, that it seems like we're talking about it again more.
We certainly are. And, there's been similarities drawn between the U.S. auto industry of the 20th century, right? We've got a lot of large law firms, mid-size, small. Same thing was true with, you can't buy a Hudson automobile anymore. It's only a small number of very, very large. There are now, of course, new electric upstarts. But I truly do believe that a lot of the sort of low value work is going to be so thoroughly commoditized. It's like any commodity. Who would have thought that computers would have been a commodity, in the 90s, right? They were all these specialized machines, super expensive. And now it's just like, whatever, go to the nearest store and buy a laptop and you'll be fine. So I think that, with the example of General Electric from what was the 80s of bringing legal in-house, a lot of these technologies are going to be implemented by the clients, and a lot of the business that especially large corps put towards their law firms is going to be very geographically specific and very matter specific, and be for the really, really complex matters, because this all ties into the conversation that we just had. If you bring in, I founded the Society of Legal Engineers here in the U.S. Like, if you bring in some legal engineers and some business experts, and you start building systems inside a corporation that can afford to build them, you can automate, streamline a heck of a lot of legal processes, as long as your lawyers inside the org are willing to do it, and you'll see significant savings and speed over time.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and especially at law firm leadership level. When like the Goldman report came out, and
Yeah,
I am confident that there will not be one legal job net loss as a result of AI. I think there will be plenty that are impacted, and there will be shifts, dramatic shifts in how legal work is done. But a good parallel is the accounting industry. So
yeah,
when spreadsheets came out, 1983, I went back and looked this up. I was going to write a post on it. 1983, Lotus 123 came out. There were about 850,000 CPAs. I don't know if you remember. I was a kid, but I was really into computers, and I happened to remember my mom owned a restaurant, and she had me doing compute. Like I was in the back writing basic programs. I got a list of prospects, mailing list on a floppy disk, loaded it in, and then created mailing labels so she could mail out menus. Like, I was that kid and 10 years old with a TI 99 4A. But I remember she had an accountant, she had a CPA who was asking me, 10-year-old, if I knew how to use the spreadsheets that were coming
yeah.
out. I didn't have a clue, but they were worried. And there are now 1.5 million in the accounting industry. Again, these are rough numbers, but I just looked them up maybe 2 weeks ago. So the industry's more than doubled. And if you think about impact to an industry, it's not that different in how spreadsheets, think about all of the work that accountants used to do by hand that
Sure.
is now done, projections, pro formas, even just basic P&Ls. So I don't think there's going to be any job loss. I think there's going to be a ton of impact, but no loss. I don't know. What's your perspective?
I think that I can't find a good comparison for an industry that is as underserved as the legal services industry. So I don't really have any worry, except for if you're hiding something, which a lot of, I'm going to be honest, professionals in the legal industry tend to do, which is, hiding the fact that they, don't know about a particular matter, or are recycling content and billing, multiple hours for drafting a document that they just change a couple terms on. Stuff like that's going to go away. But there are so many unmet legal needs and regulations, regardless of who's running the country or what direction the government goes. There's always a very large and complex regulatory environment, and nobody here in the U.S. can really affect GDPR or the new EU AI Act. So we're going to have to comply with regulations all over the world. So there'd be no sort of paucity of work. It's just that people are going to need to change and learn and grow to adapt to the new environment. And if you don't like change, then yeah, you're scared right now.
Yeah. So, Econ 101 or 102, macroeconomics, supply and demand, they meet at the price of equilibrium. If you look at the hourly rates of legal professionals relative to comparably trained professionals in other fields, legal enjoys a premium. And it's for the exact reason that you're talking. There is way more demand than there is supply. There's a ton of unmet needs out there, even in the business world. For example, I had the CKO from Wilson Sonsini on the podcast, and they have a platform called Neuron.
Neuron,
Yeah,
for new businesses, yeah.
yeah, for startups, where they'll do automated tasks like offer letters. Right?
Yep.
Like, how great would it be but who can afford to have an attorney draft your offer letters? But if it's automated and, and they're checking all the boxes, and like, there is real risk, even to like, you go putting the wrong, like, go make an offer letter to a 1099. You've now put yourself in a potential co-employment risk scenario,
Right.
right? Like
Yeah.
there is all sorts of, even for entities that can afford legal work, let alone all the ones that can't. So I agree with you. I think there's huge unmet needs out there, and there will be shifts, but I don't think there will be any net loss.
Yeah, I feel obliged. I'm going to quote my mentor and professor from law school, Bill Henderson, who's now working in Indiana for access to justice issues. But he's worked deeply in the business of law, as it were. Doesn't really publish anymore on his blog legalevolution.org, but definitely a shout out for tons of great content. But his quote is, "How else can an English major with 3 additional years of education make $1 million a year?" That's kind of like, it's a lot of words, but it's a question that's posed that's like, it's not that much more school. Yeah, you have to, work for a firm as an associate. But, I went to a T14 law school. I didn't get a JD from there, so I'm not eligible for the, at the time, $235,000 a year initial salary that a first year associate was going to make at Big Law. But it just goes to show, like, you power through and you get through that sort of that gauntlet of winnowing down of who gets to play and who doesn't, and the rewards are still quite high.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you and I talked in our last conversation about AI solutions, and I shared my opinion on Copilot, which is not a good one really today. I have full confidence in Microsoft's ability to get this right in the long term, but they have rushed this out. I mean, and there's just this sense of urgency to put Copilot everywhere. It's on. They're even putting it on. There hasn't been a keyboard change in like 20 years, and
Right.
there's now going to be a Copilot key on new keyboards. So I think they've gotten a little bit over their skis on this. Like, I have not had a good experience, and I've talked about it. My listeners are probably tired of hearing me complain about it, but the more, in the beginning, I felt like one thing Microsoft is really good at is rewarding evangelists. So they have
Yeah.
this MVP program, the Microsoft our most valuable professional, and and people like evangelize and drink the Kool-Aid and spout it, and they have influence. And I think that in the beginning, before people really got their hands on it, they just assumed that it was going to be great, and it's not great. At least not yet, from my perspective. I think there's a lot of limitations. I don't know. Where do you stand on current state of Copilot?
Having worked intimately with knowledge professionals that work very heavily in documents, I can tell you that automating and creating magic for people whose bread and butter is what you're messing with, it's not difficult. It's not extremely difficult, but it is much more specific than most people would like to imagine that it is, and it's much more time consuming and a grind than most people would like to accept. I keep on quoting myself and others, but another thing that I often say these days is, one of the worst tricks the Chat GPT pulled on the world was, it convinced that AI was good at everything, because it was just such, I've seen so many lectures talking about, the most rapidly adopted platform in history, ChatGPT, and, why is that? And it's like, all of the technology already existed. It just wasn't as fun, right? So getting back to Copilot, it's not that much fun, because how often are you really pleasantly surprised, right? And I think you really have to spend time with your end users, understanding specifically what it is exactly that they do, beginning to end, and really focus on, where can I make magic? And, the whole conversation about, like, are you making, an aspirin or a vitamin? Are you helping people do something that's sort of tangential, or are you really solving a huge pain point? And I think formatting is a big deal. I haven't really seen that much, like, actual, let's call it like voice activated. Copilot is like, I want to be able to communicate with it. And I want to be able to tell it, like, fix this thing about my document, right? And the software company I was at, Exmentium, one of the things about automatically building documents was that the numbering was always rock solid, the outline numbering. And I don't think anyone suffers more from outline shenanigans than lawyers, right? The number of times I've heard folks say, I would be doing a pitch. I'd be saying, hey, yeah, this platform does this, and it automatically builds your document, and the outline, no matter what you do, no matter what you change, is going to be, completely accurate. Roman numeralettes will be in the right place. And people will say, I was crying over my tab key last night because I was trying to like manually build. I just gave up on styles, gave up on the outline control, and was, had to go through, and then, last minute somebody wants to make a change. So that's where I think we're going to start to see making people truly happy, but we're not there yet. And it's a system that's trying to do magic in everything and not really being that magical.
Yeah, speaking of the formatting issue, that's one of the areas. So I have tried so many times to use Copilot. I paid for a year's license of it at
Sure.
$30 a month. I wanted to get value, so I have tried. One of the things I try is like when I go to ChatGPT and I get back a bulleted list, and I've tried multiple times copying, pasting it into a Word document. The bullets don't come over like in normal rich text. So I prompted, but it's clear what they are, right? They're tabbed. There's a little emoji, dot. I've asked Copilot to clean it up, like make these real bullets, and it spit out the instructions to do it manually. And I'm like, man.
Or even better, let me ask you this question. Given the tight relationship and interoperability, why are you using ChatGPT and not just using Copilot?
Yeah, exactly. Because I have had too many bumps on my head trying to use Copilot.
Plain and simple. It's nerfed, guardrailed, whatever term you want to use. It's insane how many times I have done the exact same thing. And I think I'm not here to trash talk anybody's, hard work. I mean, Copilot, it's amazing to exist. It's a lot of work, but it's not doing what people want it to do. And, there's certain things that it refuses to do. You're like, forget it. I'm just going to ChatGPT because I know it's going to do it for me.
Exactly. Yeah, I had actually that ILTA roster study that I was telling you about. I put all of the titles, the job titles with innovation. I bucketed them into C-suite director, senior director, attorney, manager, analyst, and I gave it examples, and then I uploaded the spreadsheet and in Excel, the in-app Copilot, I asked it to mimic what I did, completely choked. So I took the exact same prompt, pasted it into ChatGPT, uploaded the spreadsheet, and it did it. Now, it didn't do it perfectly. There were a ton of other, like it bucketed way too many in other, and like it made some silly mistakes. Like there were titles with the word chief in it that it didn't recognize as C-suite, and I prompted it, like I kind of scolded it, like, why did you not put titles with chief in the C-suite? And he was like, oh, sorry, I should have done that, and then it would fix it. But yeah, I mean, ChatGPT and Claude aren't perfect either. But what is your perspective on like purpose-built, solutions for legal versus the general Gen AI applications that are out there?
I think, some of them work, but referring to, recent conversations I've had, you can't even think about it honestly as legal work. There's just so many different tech stacks that so many different types of lawyers use. I think I'll say the sort of like greater legal technology ecosystem really has to start talking about like, what's the practice area that you're applying your technology to, not just like, oh, it's for lawyers, right? Because it doesn't work right. There's a early example that I cited. I mean, it was fascinating to have a conversation with someone who was an established patent professional in a reasonably sized IP boutique. Him and his team filing 300 or more patents per year, and they were working with a platform that would take the initial inventor's disclosure, their description of what the novel idea was in their invention, and turn it into a set of claims, which is the very core meat of a very large patent application. And when a professional that's doing something 300 or more times per year is telling you that a platform like out of the gate is saving them 50% of like the time spent on each project. That's enormous. And just to circle back to our earlier conversation, patent prosecution, patent drafting, very much a place where you can flat fee quote up front, because what are the unknowns? I see your technology, I will draft, we will push it through the USPTO as best we can. So that's a specific use case. And one quick other one that I looked at and I've spoken to local governments and law enforcement about is taking police body cam footage, the transcript just from the audio, and running that through a platform and generating a police report. And we're talking at least 50% time savings. So this is kind of my view on, purpose built versus general. There's things that are supposed to help people in business. There's, Gen AI and technical tools that are supposed to help people in legal. And then there's like somewhat boring, but very, very specific purpose built tools where the model has been detuned, hallucinations, trained correctly, and weighted properly, that it like does magic. And that's really what you're expecting the AI to do.
Yeah, you and I talked a little bit about small language models and ones that you can run locally. I mean,
Yep.
Meta puts out Llama, which
Yep.
you can download and run locally. I haven't done it, but I think I've downloaded it, but I really just kind of played around. Haven't done anything serious with it. But I think you were talking about how you could leverage a small language model for something that is really sensitive, like a patent application or transactional documents, and work on them locally, blow the thing away, and then re-download it to make sure that there's no overlap in customer data. I mean, are people really doing that?
That's the exact story that I got. So for full clarity, the police body cam app, that was a private instance run on the cloud, I believe. But the specifically the patent drafting application, the claim drafting, was a local downloaded model that didn't learn or remember anything. So it was interesting talking to the creators of this platform. And they're saying now there's absolutely no way that if you're working on a patent for Google and then you need to work on a patent for Apple, it is totally impossible for there to be any sort of cross infection. But because it's a downloadable model and we only update it every whatever it is quarter, delete it like you said, re-download it, and then use it for your Apple work, and then you are like so air gapped it's not even funny. But overall, local models. I think we spoke about sort of it's not American exceptionalism. It's a passion for what I'll say is avoiding the true sort of energy costs or implications of what it is that we do. Giant homes. I used to work in heating and cooling, high efficiency analysis. It's just like 3 air conditioners on a house, gigantic cars, and I'm not going to go on a bender about save the trees, but I'm just saying that our nation is so incredibly wealthy that we have the absolute privilege of almost completely ignoring how much energy we consume to do something. And I really think that's taken hold in AI. And again, not going into all of the environmental hazards of AI, but like the real fallback to that is we're not building the tools that we could that have way better privacy controls and way better security, because we're just saying, well, there's going to be a new model. Claude puts out something new, OpenAI makes their adjustments, and it's just going to be awesome. Like, at what other time in industry were we so passionate about using like the brand new, most new thing? It's like, a quick comparison is, I'll go shopping for a car. They do the sort of model refreshes, right? You don't get the first year of the new model refresh. You get sort of let the company learn how they're building that exact form and feature set, and then buy in, before they sort of switch over again. And I'm really think that mindset's going to come out. I think we're going to see a lot more small, compact local models running, and possibly some steps taken back from a pure SaaS model, to the point of like, go out and get this kind of laptop that has this level or more of processor, and it will run the tool that we're going to give you and it's going to do magic for you, but it won't be cloud based because, that's not the way it should work.
Yeah, I'm one of those suckers who I bought a 2022 Tundra after it was completely overhauled, and all of the 2022s, the non-hybrid 2022s, and half of the 2023s have to have complete engine replacement.
Wow.
Yeah,
Those are great
so
trucks. That's
they're
too
great.
bad.
Yeah, and the problem is, like I could just rack up miles. They have announced the recall, but they have not established the process yet. I
Right.
mean, imagine how it's hundreds of thousands of vehicles.
Yeah.
So, I could just drive mine forever, and I know I'm going to get a new engine, but you're going to be out of a vehicle for 8 to 10 weeks, and they give you like $40 a day. I'll be driving a clown car, and I'm 6'5", 270,
Right.
like. you know so I'm not looking forward to it. You know what? And I know better, because you're right, you do want to buy it a year or two after the remake, and then lay your money down.
At least I actually go for the the midlife refresh where you get a couple of upgrades. That's my strategy.
Yeah, I wish I would have followed that advice, because now I'm stuck with a V. I mean, I'm going to take a beating, because when you look up the VIN in Kelly Blue Book, it shows the recall. So anywhere I
Sure.
trade it in, they're going to know. And if I were to sell it to a private seller who wants to get a new engine, maybe. But all right, well, switching gears, you and I talked a little bit about Harvey, and
Yeah.
Harvey's a really interesting case. Like, they have their Series B, which was, I think, like last December, November, something like that. It was 700 million ish valuation, 715. 7 months later, July 2024, 1.5 billion was the valuation of their Series C round. So they doubled in value in 7 months. Now, what could have taken place think about how difficult it is to double enterprise value, right? Like, they didn't even double revenue. I think they went from 20 to 30, and those are unofficial numbers. They don't disclose
Right.
revenue, but they've had a couple of interesting pivots. They were trying to raise 600 million to buy VLEX, and then that fell through. They've been running in stealth mode, and now they're, I think, starting to realize that there's been a little bit of skepticism about the platform. I don't know. What's your take on all these happenings?
Sure. Been thinking about it a little bit, and I don't know if we can call it the boy band model of entrepreneurship and tech startups, but I'm going to be honest. I think they did a truly stellar job of reading what was going to look good to investors, to the market. And I've really been thinking about this. I want to say, if you've seen the way that Ford Motor Company, started assembly line and has grown and it became incredibly valuable, of course, as a company. Imagine if, like, it happened again, and you saw in a similar industry that a company was sort of situating itself like just like a previous successful sort of like business model. And I think that's what Harvey did very, very well. They knew what was going to appeal to the market. They knew, I think, with decent confidence, that they didn't need to have a fully fleshed out magical product that made everyone happy. They needed to look really good coming out of the gate, and they did really well on that. And because we have the Industrial Revolution has enough sort of back history, we can look at it, how the different companies, American Automotive now is only a few. I think a lot of investors are prognosticating that Harvey is going to win, that they just went above a couple of critical thresholds, started off with not that much, but looked really good doing it, and then got enough traction, got enough customers where it's just like, whether they bought VLEX or not, they look like they're going to be a winner in more than one space. And so you might as well invest early. The earlier, the better, because they're probably going to win more likely than many others. And that's where I think a lot of the bets are being laid. So I think, if you look at do the revenues justify the valuation? No, but it's human optimism, right? But also just people really gaming out, like, how is this going to work? How many different tech platforms is a law firm going to be hiring to do X, Y, and Z? And if you can get to that critical mass, you can be Harvey. They didn't buy VLX this time, but they've definitely signaled to the market their willingness to work on very large acquisition deals. And I think that's very much just a snowball that keeps happening because, they'll be the one platform to rule them all if everything goes their way.
Yeah. Yeah, there's real value there. It's not like these are Bored Ape NFTs, right? That what you
Right. Yeah.
they are building a real business. It's just the their go to market approach is interesting. In my experience, having relationships and experience in your go-to-market team in legal tech, not just having lawyers on staff who've
Right.
practiced in big law, but actually having your business, your go-to-market team understand the dynamics in legal tech, which is unique, is a really important ingredient. When I look at their go-to-market team, I don't see a ton of that. I see a lot of folks, really smart-looking folks. But yeah, it's been, and again, the stealth mode, and then now coming out of it, it's been interesting. As an outsider who's had very little exposure, I've seen the stuff they've published on the web. I've actually seen a little bit more than that. It looks interesting. It looks like it's a UI play. They're really crafting a user experience for legal that's going to always probably leverage OpenAI, right? They're one of their biggest investors, so it's interesting.
I'd have to imagine. I feel obliged to point out that the specific strategy is familiar to the private equity venture capital space. In the pros that I've talked to in that region, the ones that vet and invest in, put a lot of dollars into tech, AI tech, legal tech, see that it is an emerging way to grow a large business in you're building the plane as it flies, and that's much more acceptable than it used to be because the technology is happening so quickly, and because there are so many unknowns about what is AI going to do, what is it going to do next. They say, if you've got a market opportunity, you realize that it's your TAM is your total addressable market is big enough, and it's not being satisfied, or you can do it cheaper, you've got a business opportunity, great. Or you can be Yeti coolers, and you can convince people there's this new thing that you never spent a lot of money on, but now we have a new awesome thing, new market, you do that. I think it would be it was impossible to ascertain like what was the big successful market play for legal, partly because there's so many different practice areas, but partly because I think it was especially hard to even come up with that magical thing that you could convince legal professionals to sort of buy into that. There is no Yeti cooler for lawyers. Look, it does this thing. It's like, I don't want to change. I don't like that. Or that makes me more efficient and I don't want to leave the billable model. Right. So I've talked to a decent number of big law customers of Harvey who very much have input into the product. So it is still sort of like a developing mindset. I would love to hear some of those product conversations. They said this, they said that. How do we rectify? It's kind of how I describe what a lot of my job is that sort of Venn diagram process of finding enough to be successful without making anybody too upset about not satisfying all their needs.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be an interesting journey. I know we're running out of time here.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. So this is your show. You're running it. Happy to do whatever you need.
Yeah. Well, I guess just kind of wrapping up.
Sure.
One final question. So, what would you say to a firm who is starting to map out their Gen AI strategy in terms of where to get started? Because there's a lot of confusion in that space, and there's a lot of different approaches I see being thrown around. I've always advocated for start with the lowest risk, highest reward use cases possible. And a lot of those exist on the business of law side, right? Finance, marketing, HR, right? You don't have client data. It's if something goes wrong, you're not putting your client and your fiduciary obligations at risk. I don't know. What would you say to a firm who's starting to think about this and as to where to start?
Sure. Well, it's going to take resources, so you're going to have to make that hire. And I think you can find unicorns are out there. I provide certain services, consulting and advisory. I know a lot of other folks that do about, you're not going to hire someone in-house right away, but at least, talk to someone who knows this process and understands the psychology specifically about working with law firms. That's number one. Number two is, don't expect anything whiz bang from any type of new provider, because especially if it's an actual firm, the most disappointing conversations I have with people are like, well, given sort of your privacy requirements, and this is firms but also other organizations, given your privacy requirements, given your budget, given your appetite for risk and innovation, you're going to have to stick with whatever it is that your current software vendors are willing to provide you. Like, what new platform should you get? What's your first step in AI or Gen AI? Like, talk to every one of your current relationships and see what it is that they're doing, right? Because it's just like, I talk to, the CISOs of the world and the IT managers, and they're like, there's no way we're going to keep our employees from going off the rails. A lot of these platforms are just not well established enough to have the proper guardrails, the SOC 2, whatever it might be. And so that can be disappointing. But the flip side of that is, go play in Copilot is not the best advice either. So I would say starting out is, be intentional about your resources, be small in your aspirations, but also in your wins. Don't shoot for a big win. And also, talk to your core providers, which in the case of law firms, they've got the huge advantage, I think, of having that small cohort of, Thomson Reuters and all their, that small cadre of legal information service providers that have been buying these other platforms and have been connecting them and have the budget to build them into robust solutions. And to just, how many people were using co-counsel, right? Like, here's this thing that helps you draft. Like, I don't want to use it. I know how to draft a document. Like, well, give it to an associate, and if it makes them faster, it makes them faster, and then figure out your business of law and your profit margins later.
Yeah, that's good advice. I mean, I think it's that's a prudent path, is to,
Nice.
Maximizing that risk reward equation, talk to existing vendors that you are already established in the firm and who you've already made investments and commitments in, and start plotting your journey there. I think that's
I do a lot of talking people down, and I've got decades of experience in it, working as a contractor, walking into somebody's building, and they know exactly what's wrong. And you're like, okay, let's talk about, what are the symptoms before you try to pay me for a cure that won't work. Right.
Yeah. I think I heard this quote, I can't remember where, recently, about Albert Einstein said that if he had a problem that were to have the potential to end humanity, and he had 1 hour to solve it, he would spend 59 minutes trying to understand the problem and 1 minute coming up with a solution.
Yeah.
I think that's prudent advice. You got to understand what you're solving for. And with technology, it's so easy to get, I call it ADSO instead of ADD. It's attention deficit. Ooh, shiny object.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's one step above ADD. So, how to wrap it up here? How do folks get in touch with you, learn more about the work that you do or the writing that you do? How do folks find you?
Sure. Absolutely on LinkedIn. Definitely not on Twitter. I'll start with that. Website, gammawave.ai, email eric@gammawave.ai. But I'm findable on LinkedIn, and I think there's only 2 people in the world that have my first and last name. So honestly, you can Google me and find me.
That's amazing, because I have a much more unique first name and last name. It feels like Theodoropoulos, and there's several. So That's
Yeah.
surprising.
Greece is a big country, if I'm guessing right.
Yeah. All right. Well, good stuff, man. I really appreciate you spending some time, and hope to see you soon.
You bet. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
All right. Take care. Thanks for listening to Legal Innovation Spotlight. If you found value in this chat, hit the subscribe button to be notified when we release new episodes. We'd also really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate us and leave us a review wherever you're listening right now. Your feedback helps us provide you with top-notch content. Want to dive deeper into the world of legal innovation? Connect with us online at getinfo-.com, where you'll find additional resources and articles. You can also follow us on social media at getinfo- to stay updated on the latest news and insights in the field of legal tech and knowledge management. Once again, thank you for joining us today on Legal Innovation Spotlight, a fireside chat series hosted by Info-.